The average American loses about 12 years of life expectancy eating the standard American diet. Over 60% of our calories are processed. We eat 220 pounds of meat a year. That's a bathtub of dead animal. That's just way too much. The longest lived people in the world are eating every single day. People want to make a health change. The runway is through their mouth.
Hi, I'm Lexi, the editor-in-chief of the Nutrition Insider, a publication and resource for those who are looking to level up their health. We speak with the most innovative brands in the health and wellness industry to learn insider information about how you can improve your health. With us today is Dan Buettner, best-selling author, co-founder of Blue Zones Kitchen, and producer and host of the Netflix TV miniseries Live to 100: Secrets of the Blue Zones. This is a docuseries based on his own books that examines areas known as the Blue Zones, where people live the longest, healthiest lives. Today, we're not only going to pick Dan's brain about the Blue Zones, but also get some tips on how you can improve your life expectancy and live a healthier life. Well, before we get into it, I just want to say thank you so much, Dan, for joining us and letting us talk to you and sharing some of the great info that you have with our audience. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, awesome.
I love talking nutrition.
Yeah, I'm glad because, we got a lot of nutrition questions for you. So could you tell our audience, people who haven't heard of you yet, could you tell them a bit about yourself and about the Blue Zones and some of your research?
Well, I'm a four-time New York Times best-selling author, and I'm the host of Live to 100: Secrets of the Blue Zones on Netflix, and I'm a National Geographic Fellow. And as a project, we set out to, in a sense, reverse engineer longevity. So instead of looking for longevity in a test tube or a petri dish, we found 5 populations around the world that are living manifestly longer than the rest of us. And because only about 20% of how long we live is dictated by our genes, 80% is something else. Something is going on in these populations that is driving extraordinary longevity. And my job was to identify them and then find teams of scientists to find their common denominators or their correlates that seem to explain longevity. So that was the origin of Blue Zones.
So could you tell us where the Blue Zones are located primarily around the world?
The longest lived men in the world live in the highlands of Sardinia. The longest lived women in Okinawa, Japan. There's an island in Greece called Ikaria where they're living about 8 years longer than we are in the United States, but with no discernible dementia. In Nicoya, Costa Rica, people there enjoy the lowest rate of middle-age mortality. Now, I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially they have about a 3-fold better chance of reaching a healthy age 95. And then in the United States, it's among the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, California. And this is a population of Americans that live about 7 years longer than their California counterparts do.
Wow. So could you tell us what the top 3 or 4 characteristics are of each of these locations and kind of the similarities that they share?
First of all, they eat a whole food plant-based diet. The 5 most common foods in all Blue Zones are whole grains, greens and garden vegetables, nuts, tubers like sweet potatoes. The cornerstone of every longevity diet in the world is beans. And if you're eating about a cup of beans a day, it's worth about 4 extra years of life expectancy if you're young enough. Number 2, they have a vocabulary for purpose. So they're not waking up with the existential stress of wondering what I'm going to do all day today. They have very clear direction. Number 3, they live in places where it's easy to have a committed circle of friends. They're not suffering from loneliness and they're connecting. And then lastly, they live in environments that nudge them into movement every 20 minutes or so.
Wow.
So they're taking the equivalent of 10,000 steps a day without even thinking about it. Those 4 characteristics combined seem to be driving most of the 10 extra years of life expectancy these people enjoy.
Wow. So I just want to jump back to 2 things. First is the idea of having a similar vocabulary. So kind of going off of that metaphor, do you feel like these communities are sharing a similar vocabulary for purpose, or do they each have their own individual sort of purpose in each of their communities that people can also instill in their own lives?
They all have a separate vocabulary word for purpose, which is an indicator that it's so important.
Right.
In Okinawa, you can ask an older person what their ikigai is, and they'll know off the top of their head. Whereas if you ask an average 70 or 80-year-old in America, what's your purpose? Most people will stumble through an answer. So if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. And the fact they have vocabulary for purpose just indicates that these are a directed people with a strong set of values and a strong sense of life direction.
How would someone in the U.S. who, kind of stumbles over the question of, what is my purpose? How would you recommend someone go about kind of finding that purpose? Or is that an individual journey? I mean, it is, obviously everybody's individual journey, but how do you get on that path to start learning your purpose?
So there's a famous study from the National Institutes on Aging that show that people who can articulate their sense of purpose are living about 8 years longer than people who are rudderless. Purpose, in my view, is the convergence of values, of passions, of knowing what you're good at, and then having an outlet for it. So imagine just starting with a blank screen with 4 columns. One column are my values, and they're two or three word phrases like, I'm conservative, I'm liberal, I like animals, I care about kids, women's issues is my passion, whatever. But actually writing those down. A second column that writes, well, what are my passions? I write. I'm good at coming up with the first idea. I'm good at solving conflict. Number 3, what am I good at? Well, I'm good at fixing things. I'm good at being a caretaker. And then finally, once you have all those 3 columns listed out, then you look for commonalities. And for most Americans, it's not their job. Fewer than 30% of Americans wake up with a clear sense of meaning and purpose at work. So that means they have to get it elsewhere. Sometimes it's through time spent with family. Sometimes it's through a hobby. The best way, in my opinion, is through volunteering, which seems so sort of trite and why do I do that? But there's very good research that shows that people who volunteer weigh less, they have less heart disease, they have lower healthcare costs, and they're happier. So it's an idea very much put to work in blue zones, but I think under-celebrated here in America as an outlet for purpose.
Right. And the idea of volunteering also, you covered this a little bit in your documentary, but it helps instill a sense of community as well. Finding community in those volunteer groups, but also being in your community and helping.
A 2-bird for 1 stone strategy is volunteer as a group.
Right.
Because you'll bond, and you tend to be with people who share your passions and your interests, and a very fertile terrain to make a true friend.
Yeah. I would just say from my own personal experience, my parents are very purpose driven. They're very, they know exactly what they want and how they want to live their lives. And a big part of their lives is volunteering and being part of communities. So I'm hoping that means that they're going to live very long lives.
Give them a big hug on Dan Buettner's part.
Oh, yeah, definitely, for sure. So I wanted to jump back because you mentioned something interesting about the difference between gender longevity between the location Okinawa in Japan, right, and in Sardinia, where men live longer in Sardinia and women are living longer in this location in Japan. Is there research into why that is?
Well, in general, for every 1 male centenarian, there are 5 female centenarians. So women seem to do much better than men at reaching age 100. However, the men that do reach 100 tend to be in better shape than the women. In Sardinia and Nicoya and Icaria, the proportion is 1-to-1. So it's not that the men are living longer. It's just the men live as long as the women. Okay. So there's a couple conclusions you might draw. The first one is that, women hormonally have an advantage, estrogen over testosterone. Women don't march off to war, so they don't die early. They don't have that testosterone toxicity at 15 to 18 when they do stupid shit. And they also tend to take better care of themselves, have better social circles. But the fact that in 3 of these blue zones, the proportion of centenarians, male to female, is 1-to-1, suggests that also maybe men have the ability to remove these factors that are foreshortening their lives, or maybe women are carrying more stress in the blue zones And even though they're living a long time, they're not living as long as they could be. We just don't know.
Yeah. Is there still ongoing research into blue zones and all the differences between them and how people are living longer?
A little bit, but most of the original blue zones are disappearing. And I'm working on another project right now to find new blue zones that have emerged in the last 50 years or so, and that are producing extraordinarily long-lived and healthy people.
Can you talk a bit about where those are cropping up? Or
Absolutely no.
Oh, dang. You're saving it for the book, right?
Yes.
Gotcha. So talking about the blue zones, some people might think that this comes down to geographical location and that they could never imitate the same things that happen in these blue zones where they live. But does it come down to geographical location, or is it mostly these different philosophies that encompass blue zones, and are they repeatable?
They do have a geographical advantage. They live in a place where it's not tropical, so they're not getting tropical diseases and dying young, and it's not too cold they can't grow a garden. They're usually at about the latitude of California or Italy or the 20th degree north. Many of them live in steep villages, so they're getting that extra physical activity. But I believe the central characteristic in blue zones is the fact they live in environments where the healthy choice is the easy choice. And that idea is portable. You can transport that anywhere. And our bodies, if you're living in Oklahoma or Arkansas or Denver, where we are right now, your body has the same capacity to make it to a healthy age 95 as somebody living in Sardinia and Okinawa. And it's just that these people, I think, are fortunate with an environment, less than a geography. They're moving more and eating better and socializing more and living their purpose as a result of their ecosystem, not of any conscious effort. And that's a very important point.
This sounds less like a scientific concept than like a philosophy to live by. Is it a little bit of both?
It's not a philosophy. These people don't possess some belief that we don't. I mean, it is an approach to health and longevity that's not trying to break food down to its nutritional subcomponents. It's not trying to hammer you into a diet or guilt you into exercise. It's about taking an ecosystem approach to health that I would argue works much better than anything we're trying right now. If you're looking at responsible research, people are eating mostly a whole food, plant-based diet, have much lower rates of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, many kinds of cancers, dementia, and they live longer. Mm-hmm. Blue Zone's kitchen was formulated for longevity, mimicking the exact food that people in blue zones are eating. The only alteration is, in order to compete with meat eaters, we have this slogan, it has to be maniacally delicious. We're not necessarily trying to add more food to the world. We're trying to make a healthy alternative to what most Americans are eating and the type of foods that are killing Americans.
Right.
The average American, by the way, loses about 12 years of life expectancy eating the standard American diet. Over 60% of our calories are processed. We eat 220 pounds of meat a year. That's a bathtub of dead animal. That's just way too much. In blue zones, they're eating about 20 pounds a year. So we're eating about 11 times more than that. So until the American's food environment produces something that is tasty as the burgers and the fries and the candy bars and the soda pops, Americans are going to continue to suffer obesity and continue to die prematurely of horrible diseases.
Speaking more about the U.S. diet, what are some of the things that people can do? You know, that portion of the U.S. population that is eating a mostly processed diet. What are some of the very first things that they can do to start to reduce, the amount of processed foods that they're eating and bring in more of those blue zone philosophies into their own lives?
Number one, cook at home. Our grandparents always cooked at home. The eating out phenomena, we eat out about 130 times a year, and every time we eat out, we consume about 300 more calories than if we just cooked at home. So people say, why don't I have time to cook at home? Well, first of all, I wrote this book called Blue Zones Kitchens, which has 100 recipes, all of which take less than a half hour, and will produce anywhere from 5 to 10 meals at under $2 a meal, and that will help you live to 100. The time you save by not dying 12 years prematurely more than makes up. You don't have time to not eat healthy or not cook at home. The best strategy, instead of New Year's resolution or joining the next diet, get yourself the equipment to cook. And sometimes it's simply as easy as an Instapot. Get your hands on a whole food plant-based cookbook. Try a half a dozen recipes. I know people are kind of rolling their eyes. Oh, I don't want to do that. That is the best thing you can do, because as soon as you find a handful of recipes that you love, you know how to cook quickly, and your family likes, my job is over. That's the best thing you can do. And eat more beans. So people say, well, I don't want to eat beans because I'll fart or get bloated. But the reality is, if you soak beans, rinse them, cook them thoroughly, no lectins, by the way, and start with just a teaspoon a day if it upsets your stomach. Then the second week, 2 teaspoons. And the third week, 3 teaspoons. Your microbiome will grow the bacteria necessary to metabolize them. So everybody can work up to a cup of beans a day without any internal tumult. You do need to boil beans for about 10 minutes, right, at least. And that neutralizes almost all the lectins. This whole plant paradox nonsense has confused people and done the biggest disservice to American eating. The longest lived people in the world are eating beans every single day.
Right. So yeah, when you first heard about the carnivore diet, I'm sure you were like, no, not the carnivore diet.
The New York Times interviewed me for that. And I challenged them to find any population on the planet Earth that eats a carnivore diet that lives a long time. And people point, well, the Maasai are healthy and the Inuit are healthy, but their life expectancy is about 63. So if you want to make it into your 80s, 90s, and 100s and you're still playing pickleball, you don't want to be eating the carnivore diet.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not the best idea. But also talking about geographical locations, but also the social systems that exist within those different locations. Do you find that also plays a role? You know, for example, in Costa Rica, they have a sort of universal healthcare system, and I'm not confident about Japan's healthcare system. But do you find that also plays a role in the longevity?
Did your homework? Good for you. They all have universal healthcare. Yeah. So, and it's the problem with Americans' healthcare system, it is completely set up to profit off of sick people. Nobody makes money if you stay healthy. In blue zones, because they're government run, they have an incentive to keep people out of hospitals, out of doctor's office, from getting prescriptions. So they check on people as they're getting older, and they catch a pre-diabetes and a pre-heart condition before it ends up in the emergency room. Our system secretly wants us to get full-blown type 2 diabetes because somebody's going to make money off of our dialysis and the insulin. And we want a heart attack because that $120,000 that it costs to show up in the emergency room with a heart attack, the pharmaceutical companies are getting it, the hospitals are getting it, the doctors are getting it. And it's not that there are bad people. It's a flawed system. Misaligned incentives is the problem. We hope for health, but we incent for sickness, and we're never going to get health that way.
With that in mind, I mean, yeah, the sort of missing or misaligned incentives, like you were saying, do you feel like there's hope for the American healthcare system, for the American, for just our social system in general? Do you feel like we're moving in that direction where we might be able to have a system someday that does align with a incentive where we are healthy and we are happy and purposeful?
I don't see it, actually. As long as we have a political system where the pharmaceutical lobby, which is very powerful, and the healthcare lobby, very powerful, and the American Medical Association, very powerful, are convincing lawmakers to pass laws that favor them, we're not going to have a system that keeps people healthy. No, I think it's going to tank us, quite honestly.
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully
What's the hope? Where's the ray of light? I haven't seen it in my lifetime.
Well, there's always us. That's why we're
yes,
here.
That's right. That is right. We need the 20s and 30-year-olds to reject the crappy system that came from before them. There is that hope. Yes, I'll take that.
I mean, I feel like that's the whole motivation for our generation is I'm right on the cusp of Gen Z and millennials. So I kind of feel like I have 2 feet in 2 different generations, but I feel like that's kind of the hope that is being instilled by Gen Z, is that there is hope and there is a way that we can come out of this, but it takes belief, and maybe it's naive, but it is still a hope and faith that we can, change a broken system, fix a broken system. But if we just give in, then there is no hope.
Well, you need more than hope. You need the right target. And there's 2 targets you should aim your efforts at. The first one is universal health care. I can tell you that the longest lived, healthiest, and happiest places in the world, everybody has a right to free health care, basic health care, not to get a facelift for free. And secondly, the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill right now is completely set up to grow grains and seeds and meat. And those are the input of almost all the junk food and all the processed foods until the Farm Bill shifts so that organic farmers have the same incentives and the same subsidies that the corn, soybean, and sugar beet farmers have. We're not going to see any difference there. Farm Bill and universal health care. Gen Z, you have your marching orders. I'm going to come back in 20 years to a healthier America.
I'm ready. Yeah. So touching back, you mentioned earlier about pickleball. What are some of the ideal physical activities that people can do to kind of live longer?
So the pickleball stat came from Dan Buettner, but it derived from a study that showed that people who play racket sports are living longer than joggers, bicyclists, golfers, or football players. But I think racquetball is one of the greatest social innovations we've seen in the last 2 generations, because we have a lonely country, and pickleball is a great way to meet people as well as get physical activity. Of course, it's a great way to blow out your Achilles tendon too, but nevertheless, I'm a big fan of it. The best sort of physical activity is the physical activity that you'll do. We are wrong-minded to think that we're going to sit in our office all day long and make up for it at the gym. There's 2 problems with that. First of all, we don't go to the gym. You start with 100 people on January who sign up for a gym membership, you lose 80% of them by the end of the year. We think we're going to go, but we actually don't. That's what the data shows. And number 2, our species evolved in pretty much constant movement. We were hunters and gatherers. We were pretty far down the food chain when we had to run for our lives. We had to build fires. We had to build our homes, et cetera, et cetera. Walking is far more powerful than people think. If you're completely sedentary, just 20 minutes of walking a day, it adds 3 years to your life expectancy. There is no pill, no supplement, no nutrient on the planet that will give you 3 years of life expectancy.
Mm-hmm. So you walk 20 minutes a day, or you just do a mix?
I walk about 9,000 or 10,000 steps a day on average, wow. But I do something else. I either play pickleball, I ride my bike, I stand up paddle surf.
The cycling, that's a big one.
I have a very social gym where I live in Miami, and I go there. I can see my friends and listen to podcasts, and I can only bench about 800 pounds, but
800 pounds.
I try to get my exercise in.
World record. Cool. So I want to ask something more specific about green tea. Have you seen, this would be more popular, I would assume in China and Japan, but have you seen any connection or correlation with consumption of green tea and longevity as well? Or is that it also is a mix of different?
Yeah, there's plenty of correlations. We don't know why, but people are drinking 4 or 5 cups a day are living longer. And it might be the antioxidants. It may be because they're drinking that instead of a Diet Coke.
Right.
We don't exactly know, but it definitely stacks the deck in favor of your longevity if you're sipping on some green tea.
Cool. So I'm kind of curious about your personal diet. So you eat a lot of whole foods and everything at home, and what's kind of the Dan Buettner diet? Is it different from the Blue Zone diet?
No, it's pretty I start every day with the minestrone soup that has 3 beans in it. Yeah. If you come to danbuettner.com, you can get the recipe for free, my minestrone. The thing is, if you start your day with a minestrone with lots of vegetables and beans in it, and by the way, it's maniacally delicious.
Yeah, I bet.
If you start your day with something that doesn't have sugar and something that's not bacon and eggs, get your fiber, you stay satiated through the morning, you're less likely to snack. If you want to talk about a nutrient, I would argue it's the most important nutrient we are not getting in America. We have 100 trillion bacteria in our gut. The only thing the healthy bacteria consume is fiber. And if you're not feeding them fiber, they're going to work on your mucous membrane, making it more likely you'll have irritable bowel syndrome or leaky gut syndrome. If you're eating fiber, those little bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids and modulate your immune system and create the precursors to the feel-good hormones. So anyway, I went too far down a rabbit hole there.
No, that's
so
good.
Minestrone,
we love it. Yeah.
And then I'll typically have a mid-afternoon snack, which is usually nuts and tea or some fruit. I live in Miami and all the action's at night, so I go out to eat almost every night. And that's probably not the ideal time to eat, but it's the fun time to eat.
Yeah, I bet. So kind of moving into more of the subject about the Blue Zone's kitchen and sort of your involvement, you're the co-founder. So what inspired you to, go from the book and the cookbook and the research and everything to then, founding your own company that actually produces Blue Zone's meals?
So there's 2 things. One, I'm a science journalist, and I wrote this book called The Blue Zone Kitchen that went back to all the Blue Zones and captured 100 recipes that lived 100. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller, #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller, and it vastly outsold all the serious books I read. So I said, well, this is the way America wants to learn about longevity. I think people want to make a health change. The runway is through their mouth, and it took me a while to wake up to that. I realized that my longevity evangelism is best done with food. And I understood early on it had to be maniacally delicious. Secondly, my daytime job, Blue Zones gets paid by insurance companies and hospitals to go into entire cities and lower their BMI, their weight, and raise their life expectancy and lower their healthcare costs. I'd stand up to auditoriums full of people and try to explain how to eat Blue Zones. And these are people like McDonald's and Pizza Hut. So part of the manifestation of my mission has been to give them an easy, cheap, delicious Blue Zone meal that they can quickly make. So now I have them in every Whole Foods in America, and when we're working at a Blue Zone city, if I'm standing in an auditorium and I'm asked, how can I eat Blue Zones? I just say, go to your freezer, and for $7 you can get a Blue Zone meal.
So let's say I don't buy, the Blue Zone kitchen meal. I would love to. I'm going to go look for it at Whole Foods when I get home. But what are some of the foods that I can pick up at the grocery store to really improve my diet?
Steel cut oatmeal for breakfast with some walnuts or chopped almonds in there and dates. It's a perfect breakfast. Maybe some soy milk or oat milk on top of it. People think that they have to be rich to eat healthy, and the absolute opposite is true. The healthiest foods are peasant foods. You can pick up a pound of lentils or black beans or black-eyed peas for $2 or so, and you get the right recipe, you can make them taste delicious. Whole grains, barley, for example. You can buy a pound of barley. Barley is absolutely delicious. Frozen vegetables are cheaper and they retain their nutrients better in many cases than the fresh stuff. So, I make a smoothie out of frozen blueberries, frozen spinach. Get that, it actually adds flavor. A little bit of oat milk and some dates, and it tastes maniacally delicious. So, beans, grains, greens, and nuts. Those are your 4 pillars. And sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes. They're cheap. Microwave them if you want. Wrap them in a wet paper towel and then put them in the microwave for a few minutes. Or you want a 2-ingredient delicious meal?
Yeah.
Steam your sweet potatoes, mash them up, and then add a can of coconut milk. Mix them together.
Okay. Oh, I love that.
I'm telling you, that is crack.
Oh, okay. I'm definitely going to try that when I get home. That sounds good.
Okay, I want you to send me a picture of that.
I will.
Because I feel you're just saying this.
No, I'm not.
You heard it.
I work for the Nutrition Insider. I have to eat healthier. I'm a hypocrite. So, yeah. If our audience, who is listening if there's one thing that you could tell them that you want them to take away from this conversation, that you want them to know about Blue Zones and the diet and the philosophy and everything, what would it be?
Well, when it comes to food, cook at home or try Blue Zone's Kitchen. Number 2, pay attention to your social circle. Who your 3 best friends are has an enormous impact on what you eat and what you do and don't do. So try to curate healthy friends and take the time to know your values, your passions, what you're good at, and have an outlet. Know your sense of purpose.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. Your whole, at the beginning when you're talking about identifying your purpose and everything, I feel like I need to go home and write in a journal and kind of identify exactly those things. I feel like I'm living my purpose right now, but I'm like, I don't know, dude, am I really like living every day, towards that purpose? So I think that'll resonate with a lot of people who are kind of looking for the same thing. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that with us. I
can't imagine a better sense of purpose than working for the Nutrition Insider.
I know, right? This is great. I get to talk to you. I get to get awesome recipe tips and everything. I'm excited. I am going to try the sweet potato and coconut milk combo, I promise. But yeah, is there anything else that you'd like to add that you would like people to know?
If you have any questions, at Instagram, I'm at Dan Buettner.
At Dan Buettner.
And I'd be happy to answer anybody's questions if they direct message me.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. This was
You're very
amazing.
welcome.
Really
It's fun.
appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.